Hi, you're about to watch the latest episode of Izzy Dine Grills. This time, I sat down with the Trans Liberation Group, a campaign group within your party, trying to make sure that trans rights are part of the party's founding documents. This is your party, the sort of Jeremy Corbyn, Zarah Sultana project that is attempting to be very democratic, but has found a lot of controversy. We talked about trans rights, their policies, and whether your party is, as many people have thought, dead on arrival. This is Izzy Dine Grills. Wanted to start by asking how you kind of got formed and how you started organizing together.
Sure. So I think a lot of us had been involved in various different bits of organising before. I'm a member of Iris 21. I'd done some other trans organising in Manchester. And then when your party got started, um, we were looking to get involved with that. There was a faction called the Democratic Socialists that got set up, and another one of our members called Jamie thought that a trans faction would be an important thing to set up as well, given the whole situation in Britain at the moment. And so she got a person called Matt Shanley to put out a tweet basically saying, if you're interested in a trans faction, send your email over. And so we set up a Zoom meeting off the back of that of about 30 people. And we kind of just went from there, really. We had a kind of discussion on that first meeting of what we'd like it to look like, set up a WhatsApp chat, and we've gone from there.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I do want to ask because I think a lot of people will sort of be curious about it. I think there's a little bit of a sense, maybe particularly online, that perhaps your parties, especially with its sort of chaotic opening, that I think some people kind of describe it as a little bit dead on arrival. I suppose I'm wondering what motivates you to get involved, kind of in spite of that um, kind of difficulty.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of like two parts here. I think one of them is to do with like our platform, and maybe we can get a bit into that later
Mm,
on. But I think there's also the other aspect of it, which is that like it's about where you choose to struggle, and I think we see your party as not like you know I think the direction that your party goes in is still very much up in the air. Like I think we share the concerns that everybody has around the founding of the party and the chaos that's kind of been there, and just sort of like some of the people who've been involved in the founding of the party. The way that like the founding conference is being set up is being done in a bit of a hurried way that's not massively democratic. So we are by no means, wedded to your party and see it as this is definitely going in the direction we want it to go in, but we see it as sort of like a place of struggle. Like we could just give up on your party entirely at this point, and that would kind of, it would be a self-fulfilling prophecy where we say, oh, well, this isn't heading in a direction we like. Let's step back and do something else. Like if we do that, of course, it's going to fail. And so we see it as kind of like the right thing for us to do is to intervene now while we still have the potential to direct it in the direction we want to see it go. Um, like I say, we don't see that as a foregone conclusion which way it's going to go. And Trans Liberation Group, although we are obviously a big part of what we're doing is intervening in your party, our platform and what we're trying to do is still separate to your party. Like if it all goes up in flames, which it still very much could do at this point, we're not like yeah, we're not here to push for your party. We're here to push for trans liberation, and we see your party as a vehicle for us to be able to do that, basically. But yeah, we have to intervene if we want to see it head in the direction we want to see it go in. And so we see it as worth it for us to intervene rather than just sit back.
that makes a lot of sense. I so the only other question I kind of had in relation to the your party question, because I really want to get into the policy stuff, is that um, it obviously feels like a bit of a broad church at the moment. What was the feeling? Because you've been to conference a little bit, I believe. What's the feeling within the party at the moment? Is there kind of a unifying set of principles, or does it feel like very kind of argumentative?
It is definitely quite broad. We were at the Manchester Regional Assembly, which actually was probably a little more unified than I expect the party at large is. The Manchester Regional Assembly was a little bit smaller than like I think they advertised 500 tickets and there were maybe 200 people there. Um, which is definitely at least in part because of all of the stuff that's been happening at the top of the party. Um, so yeah, like there is definitely like a range of opinions. Like obviously until recently, Adnan Hussein was in the party. There's people like Mark Sawatka. Um, but like Lexi was saying, we see it as a site of struggle, and if everyone was already perfectly aligned with us on trans liberation, there'd be no struggle there. The point is to have these conversations, struggle for our ideas, and to win people over to them. Um, and so, like, as long as we're also fighting for like the party to be as democratic as possible, things like that, because we see it as an opportunity to reach new people, to win people over to our ideas. And the fact that there are a couple of loud transphobes in there doesn't change that fact.
Do you have much faith in the people at the top of your party?
Not at all, no.
Okay.
I, I think also just beyond what we think of people at the top of the party, there's also the whole how should a party be structured and should it be dependent on the people at the top at all? Um, I think that is what we see as one of the key reasons for intervening in your party is to create a party that isn't so dependent on the top people, but is more accountable to the grassroots party.
Makes sense.
You see a lot of people getting involved with like the Green Party at the moment, with like Zach Polanski, and I think Zach Polanski is taking the Green Party in a very good direction. But that sort of reliance on leaders to sort of like do your politics for you to outsource that elsewhere rather than having it as a grassroots struggle opens the door to parties wildly swinging back and forth between how much they want to defend trans people. Like you've seen that in sort of politics over the last 5-10 years, where there was kind of like a bit of a cross-party political consensus that actually trans people are mostly okay, even like 10 years ago. But the quickness with which that stance can change, where you leave that political direction to like such a small group of people at the top who often, aren't trans at all, don't know any trans people, I think that becomes a really big problem beyond just who's in control, but also how does that method of control work? Are you just leaving things up to a few individuals, or are you allowing the membership in general to lead the political direction of the party?
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I want to talk about the policy proposals now. So, a big one is that you call for an end to the segregation of the healthcare system when it comes to trans people. Could you explain a little bit more for people who don't know about what you mean by that?
So the way like trans healthcare works at the moment is you have to like get your GP to refer you to what's called a GIC, Gender Identity Clinic, the wait lists of which are currently like several years long at least, like getting close to 10 years in some places. Um, and then after you have that appointment with like a specialist, well, I think it might take a couple of appointments. You can then get things like hormone replacement therapy, a few more appointments, and all of these appointments are like several months apart because of waiting times as well, for surgeries and things like that. And all of the kind of like you need like your blood levels monitoring and things like that when you're on hormones. Um, and there's no reason that this needs to be done by some like specialist body somewhere. Um, the GPs are perfectly capable of running blood tests. Um, and we believe that hormone replacement therapy should be available on the basis of informed consent. And so that is also something that a GP can just do, right? Like a GP can explain to you like the effects of HRT and the risks and things like that. And if you understand that and you consent to it, the GP should just be able to prescribe it to you. So we kind of reject the idea of having this specialist service that you need to go through to get diagnosed and things. We reject that entirely.
Makes sense. And for people who don't know, that is also how it works in some other countries, right? Like I believe Canada has quite a similar system to that, and so on. Um, I also want to ask about there's a description on your policy about um, enshrining the legal right to transition, uh, which includes trans children who you say should not require parental consent to transition. Now, when you say that, just to give people a general idea, like how kind of young of children are you talking about? Um, exactly.
So I think the idea here is having sort of informed consent around, similar to how you have like Gillett competence for medical care, is that obviously, you know, you have to have like the ability to make informed decisions about,
Mm.
yourself, your identity. But the reality is that in a world with such hostility to trans people, it's by no means a guarantee that parents are, always working in the best interests of their children. You see it in like, for example, if you think look about the guidance being pushed to schools around teachers like forcibly outing trans kids to their parents that can like create genuine safeguarding
Mhm.
concerns for them. The idea is not to sort of like go over the heads of parents who are supportive of their children. Like, of course, parents should be involved in those decisions as much as possible. But I think the idea there is just sort of that we need to be aware of the fact that not all trans people have the support of their family, and that doesn't mean that they therefore shouldn't have the support of the rest of their community beyond that.
100%. Completely hear that. Uh, so I suppose also, is it about sort of moving trans healthcare into a direction that is more friendly to the idea of transitioning, and that includes children? Um, I suppose I think people will have questions about how that assessment process would kind of hypothetically work, I suppose is what I'm asking. How I think probably it would make some people, especially if they don't know a lot of trans people, a little bit nervous when there's kind of language around allowing children to transition without parental consent, especially in a medical context. Could you kind of answer that concern a little bit?
Yeah, I think like um a part of it is that kind of like bodily autonomy and people being able to, do what is best for their body. I mean, like, we're not saying that like 8-year-olds should be like getting bottom surgery or anything, but like
Mm.
things like puberty blockers are gonna be most effective if you have them before puberty. Which obviously you're still a child at that point. And also like the rate of like regret or detransition from um gender affirming healthcare is incredibly, incredibly low. It's not the case that like a load of people are just taking it on a whim and then going, oh, what have I done? Like it's like less than 1% of people regret um HRT, I think it is. And so like the the facts just don't kind of line up with the the concerns. Um, there are not people that are just like forcibly transing your kids. Um,
And yeah,
so
I,
yeah.
I I think the assessment is the key word there as well. Is like, how do you assess whether someone or not is trans or not? And
Mhm.
the best source of being able to tell that is from the person themselves. Like at the end of the day, that there is no test for being trans other than if a person is trans. Like if someone knows, hey, this is what I need, that is a much better signal than what you're going to get from any other external source. And so it's just about believing trans people essentially to know themselves and to know what they need.
Mm. That makes sense. I wanted to ask as well about uh, there's a particular line that I think was really important, which was about introducing a new law that abolishes the so-called trans panic defense. Could you explain a little bit more about what that is, please? And kind of
Do
why
you want me
it's
to
so
say that?
important to you to have it abolished.
Yeah, so the history of it comes from, it was originally like the gay panic defense, um, which was this kind of legal defense when gay people were murdered. Um, and the kind of idea of the defense is like, oh, I didn't know they were gay. They like surprised me by finding out they were gay. I panicked and killed them. Um, which is obviously like absurd. And that's kind of um, turned into this like trans panic defense, which is the same principle. Like someone's someone says, "Oh, I didn't know they were trans," and when I found out, it made me panic. It made me go into a fit of rage or whatever and kill this person. And like it's used like even in ways that like it's clearly false. Like there have been lots of cases where it was like very, very obvious that this person knew they were trans before sleeping with them, but they can just say, "Oh, I didn't know," and trans panic defense, and suddenly, like in a lot of cases, people get let off with murdering a trans person. The whole thing is a way to make it so that people can murder trans people and get away with it. And with transphobic hate crimes constantly like going up at the moment, we think it's a really important um, thing that needs to be gotten rid of because finding out someone's trans is not a reasonable reason to kill anyone.
I think it also goes beyond sort of that, like, the trans panic in the sense of murder, but also you see it in, there was that recent case of that woman who was done for sexual
Mm.
assault for not disclosing her trans status to her partner. I think even within sort of like the court transcripts, the judge basically said as much as, well, you definitely knew beforehand, but like still upheld that decision. And yeah, I think it comes back to what Lily was saying there, is that it creates this weapon to be used against trans people. Like, could a trans person sleep with a cis person, then later say, oh, I thought they were trans, I didn't know they were cis, and therefore they sexually assaulted me? No, like that doesn't exist. It's just used as a tool that is used to attack trans people. It is, yeah, and it can be used completely retroactively, even when everyone is kind of like aware that, oh, that's it's not actually the case, that that person didn't know it beforehand. But yeah, it is still used as a tool for the state to essentially punish trans people for the fact of being trans. And yeah, I think that's just a really big part of the issue.
Makes a lot of sense. Another one of or another set of the proposals really pertains to like um gender markings. So pushing back against ID card proposals, no gender markers on passports, and sort of self ID for everyone. Why is that so important to you?
So I guess there's some like just physical technical concerns with stuff. Like for
Mm.
example, on passports, you can say like for non-binary people, why not have something like an X on a gender on a passport? I think that creates real concerns for people traveling abroad to countries where they're not supportive of non-binary people, and having that on your passport is essentially just a big sticker saying, "Hey, I'm trans. Discriminate against me, please." So there's like the material, hey, there's a reason to not have this on. But I think there's also sort of like the wider um, thing there of, by having that marker on in the first place, if we're just reinforcing this idea that gender is important, even in contexts where it isn't important, this isn't just something that is discriminative against trans people, but it also feeds into this whole like ecosystem where it like holds gender to be important in situations where it's not important. And that doesn't just hurt trans people, but it hurts, women, anyone who's discriminated against on the basis of their gender. So there's part of it that is there as a material way to help trans people, but there's also a part there to stop reinforcing systems of patriarchy and sort of misogyny that harm everybody. At the end of the day, gender stereotypes, upholding the importance of gender where it isn't important, doesn't just hurt trans people, it hurts everyone.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that I think in terms of time, that's pretty much us. I just want to ask, is there anything else that you um sort of wanted to communicate, or any other policies or moral cause that you think are really important for you to get across?
Yeah, so I think I just want to quickly draw attention to sort of like the platform that our group is named around. Like we are the
Mm.
Trans Liberation Group, and I think that trans liberation as a phrase hasn't really entered the public consciousness as much as I think it needs to. And I think the idea there is just that it goes beyond just trans rights. Like obviously trans rights are in a bad position at the moment, you know, with Supreme Court ruling, EHRC guidance, all of that. But the oppressions that trans people face aren't just exclusive to the specific oppressions of trans people. We're also disproportionately affected by the issues that affect everyone, like the working class more generally and other marginalized communities. And the importance of trans liberation, as opposed to just fighting for trans rights, is realizing the interconnectedness of those struggles and how we have to push on all of them together. But yeah, that's what I'll say. I'll let Lily go now as well.
That makes
Yeah, I
sense.
mean, I was going to basically say the same thing. I think we haven't really touched on the socialism aspect of it, and I think that's what kind of differentiates us from a lot of other like trans rights campaigning type groups is that we are explicitly socialist. We understand that trans people cannot be liberated in a capitalist society. Um, and we also have to fight back against sexism, against racism, against ableism, all of these kind of like different forms of discrimination, because trans people also suffer from all of these types of discrimination. Anyone can be trans. And so for all trans people to truly be liberated, all people have to be liberated. And that means the end of capitalism and the introduction of socialism.
When you say trans people can't be liberated under capitalism, could you just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, so trans people are within the working class, which is exploited under capitalism. Trans people are more likely to suffer from like discrimination in housing, in workplaces, in education. But these are all things that the working class as a whole face. And indeed, like transphobia is comes from and is like justified by capitalist exploitation, which is maybe a bit too much to get into here. But like yeah, um, trans people can't be free under capitalism because no one is free under capitalism.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you both so much for sitting down with me.